3 years have passed since the Dolby incident, and the story starts with Ethan sitting and listening to Mia reading a rather creepy book to their daughter Rose while she falls asleep. Ethan notes that the story is a little bit scary to be reading to their 6-month-old daughter. After putting Rose to bed, Ethan goes downstairs and him and Mia have an argument. He mentions that the BSEA moved Mia and Ethan somewhere, and Ethan mentions that he's had military training. He says they need to speak about what happened in Dolby, but Mia doesn't want to talk about it. All of a sudden, Mia is shot in the shoulder and is brutally gunned down. Ethan takes cover, but the table is ripped away and there stands Chris Redfield, who puts another 5 shots into Mia. Chris then takes Rose and Ethan away. Ethan protests, but they knock him down. He then wakes up to a phone ringing, and it seems the transport carrying him has been attacked and Rose has been taken. He answers the phone and demands to know where Rose is, but gets no answers. He wanders down a path in the woods and eventually comes across a deserted village with an ominous castle looming in the background. Ethan encounters a man named Grigory, who hands Ethan a gun just as his house is swarmed by some kind of monsters outside. Grigory is sadly killed, and Ethan is pulled underneath the house, which is full of bodies, presumably the villagers. The monsters are revealed as lichens, and one of them bites 2 of Ethan's fingers clean off. After a tense fight, Ethan comes across a shack with a radio telling any survivors to go to Louisa's house. Ethan begins to make his way there, but is ambushed this time by large groups of lichens, led by the intimidating Urias. Before they can kill Ethan, some bells ring in the distance and all the lichens run off. Ethan spots an old lady who tells him Rose is somewhere in the village. Near to Louisa's house, Ethan comes across Elena and her father Leonardo. Leonardo has been cut by one of the monsters and is gravely injured. The 3 of them make it to Louisa's house, and Louisa makes mention of the village being quiet and devout, and then the monsters seem to come out of nowhere. The group pray and seem to be praying to a certain Mother Miranda. Leonardo then goes crazy as he's presumably succumbing to the infection, killing Louisa and the others. Elena and Ethan escape the now burning house, but Leonardo pursues them and Leonardo and Elena fall to their death. Ethan leaves the house to see what appears to be Mother Miranda killing one of the villagers, Julian, and then she disappears. Ethan follows his hunch, heads for the castle as he believes Rose to be there, but just as he's about to enter the castle, a man named Heisenberg captures Ethan and delivers him to the group known as the Four Lords and Mother Miranda herself. The Four Lords are Lady Alcina Domitrescu, Donna Beneviento and her weird creepy doll Angie, Salvatore Moreau, and lastly the man we just met, Karl Heisenberg. Domitrescu and Heisenberg are arguing over who gets to kill Ethan. Domitrescu offers Miranda cups of Ethan's blood, whilst Heisenberg offers to put on a show. Miranda eventually sides with Heisenberg, which aggravates Domitrescu. Ethan is made to run for his life and manages to survive being ground into nothing by spikes. While making the other lords assume that he is dead, Ethan continues his journey into the castle. It is here that Ethan meets a new friend, the Duke, who is a travelling merchant and buys and sells items. After a short conversation, Ethan heads into the castle, but he is captured by Lady Domitrescu's 3 daughters, Bella, Cassandra, and Daniela, who deliver him to their mother. Lady Domitrescu seems surprised that Ethan survived Heisenberg's games, and informs her daughters to hang Ethan up by his hands on hooks. She then leaves with her daughters to inform Mother Miranda of the situation. Ethan realises they will likely return at some point, so he gets free, rather painfully, but realises he needs 4 heads for the statues in order to escape the castle. He meets the Duke again, who informs him that Rose would likely be in Lady Domitrescu's chambers, so Ethan heads up there, but whilst he is on his way, he fights Bella. It seems that the 3 daughters are weakened by cold air, and this is found out when Ethan fires a stray shot which hits the window, allowing him to kill Bella. He arrives outside Lady Domitrescu's chambers and overhears a conversation between Lady Domitrescu and Mother Miranda. This call enrages her, and she throws her dresser in anger and walks off. Ethan enters the room and realises that Rose isn't there, and upon trying to escape the room, he is confronted by Lady Domitrescu, who literally pushes Ethan through the floor to the dungeons. After making his way to the dungeons, Ethan is taken completely by surprise, as Lady Domitrescu sneaks up behind him and chops his hand off. Upon regathering himself, Ethan makes it to some kind of lift, escaping from Lady Domitrescu, and reattaches his hand using the magic healing juice. All in a day's work. Anyway, Ethan finds all the remaining pieces for the statues and kills the 2 remaining daughters. He uses the statues to escape the castle, finds a dagger. He's confronted by Lady Domitrescu, who informs him that he has ruined everything, stabbing him with her claws, but Ethan returns the favour by plunging the dagger into her side. This forces the transformation in Lady Domitrescu into a grotesque mutated form. After a battle, Lady Domitrescu is defeated, and at the exit of the castle, Ethan takes a mysterious yellow flask. Following a brief stroll through an underground cave, Ethan finds the old woman again, chanting. Ethan demands to know where Rose is, but the old woman responds, saying she will be traded, life for life. She also mentions that the path he seeks may be opened by the crests of the 4 families. Underneath these crests is something familiar. The umbrella logo. Ethan comes across an area next to the village which is called the altar. He approaches the Duke, who tells a horrified Ethan that the yellow flask contains his daughter's head. The Duke mentions to Ethan that Rose has powers and that he shouldn't worry as her essence remains. He tells Ethan to find a house with a red chimney. There he can find a key which can help him obtain 3 remaining flasks, all being held by the 3 remaining lords. One by one, Ethan battles through the 2 lords, Don of Benevento and Salvatore Moreau, obtaining the flasks. Heisenberg makes Ethan fight through the Lycan stronghold and defeat Urias before he can retrieve the last flask. After he has all 4 flasks, he has to use them to obtain the Giant's Chalice, needed to activate the pathway to Heisenberg's factory. In the factory, Ethan is greeted by Heisenberg, who mentions that Ethan has been used by Miranda as a test to see if he is strong enough to be part of her family and to dispose of the 4 lords for her as they are no longer needed. Heisenberg states that his intention is to use Rose to defeat Miranda, to which Ethan obviously objects, stating that his daughter is not a weapon. Ethan is pushed into the lower depths of the factory by Heisenberg and has to fight his way to the top, only to see Heisenberg mutate and throw him all the way back down again. He goes into the room, but comes face to face with Chris. Ethan now demands answers. Chris gives in and reveals to Ethan that he wouldn't shoot Mia. He mentions that Miranda was impersonating Mia and that's why they shot her. He explains that everything in the village is a result of Miranda's life's work. The Lycans and all the monsters were a result of Miranda's experiments with the mold. Chris gives Ethan a metal polymer tank which cannot be affected by Heisenberg's influence on metal objects. Heisenberg gains the edge momentarily, but before he can kill Ethan, Chris blows up the factory, destroying Heisenberg's metal army. Heisenberg is visibly rattled by this, calling Chris a boulder-punching asshole. Ethan finally defeats Heisenberg. Chris calls him and tells him to wait there, but Miranda turns up right at that moment, mimicking Mia. She tells Ethan that the Rose is the perfect successor to Evelyn, who was a defect. She also reveals herself to be the old lady from before, then surprises Ethan and rips his heart out. Chris soon learns of Ethan's death and preps his team, the Hound Wolf Squad, to go into the village with the goal of terminating Miranda and saving Rose. Chris looks through a scope and it appears that the BSAA, which stands for the Bioterrorism Security Assessment Alliance, have also sent soldiers to the village. After destroying a structure which protected the ceremony site, Chris heads down into a hole and comes face to face with the brother of Urias, who is guarding something down there. After defeating this giant, Chris manages to find the root of the mold, which looks like a fetus. He attaches a bomb to it, but wants to kill Miranda before detonating it because of what she did to Ethan. Chris finds a lab full of information, which we'll discuss more in depth in a bit. Long story short, this is all about Miranda's own daughter Eva, who died years ago, and Miranda wants to use Rose to resurrect Eva. At the end of the lab, Chris finds a locked door, and behind that locked door, Mia. Chris, of course, has to check it's not Miranda, but yes, it's the real Mia. Chris informs Mia that Ethan is dead, and she understandably lashes out at him as he promised they'd be safe after they were moved to Europe. Mia then drops this bombshell on Chris.
I tried to keep this a secret, but you don't understand how special he is.
Ethan wakes up somewhere and has a vision of Evelyn, who tells him that he was actually killed by Jack Baker in Dolby 3 years earlier and then revived by the mold, that he has always been dead, that his entire body is literally just made up of mold. After this brief chat, Ethan wakes up in the Duke's carriage and Ethan asks the Duke to take him to the ceremony site, and the Duke takes him there. Duke bids Ethan farewell and Ethan has a final confrontation with Miranda, whose attempts to resurrect her daughter using the 4 flasks and the mold have failed, as Rose is just eventually reborn as Rose. This causes Miranda's powers to fade. Miranda is devastated, but surprised to see Ethan alive. Chris shoots Miranda, allowing Ethan to grab Rose, but Miranda takes Rose back, absorbing her. Ethan fights with Miranda and defeats her. He grabs Rose but collapses, as with Miranda dead, his own mold is deteriorating too. Chris wakes him up and helps him, tries to help them escape, but Ethan sacrifices himself and offers to detonate the bomb to save everyone else. As Chris makes it back to the chopper, he gives Rose to Mia, tells the pilot they all need to leave, and as they ascend and fly away from the village, Ethan detonates the bomb, killing himself, destroying the village, and also destroying the root of the mold. Chris tells Mia that he tried to save Ethan, but Ethan offered to sacrifice himself. Finally, Chris is called over by a member called K9, who informs him that the BSAA didn't even send soldiers, they sent bioweapons. Chris tells the pilot to plot a course for BSAA Europe headquarters, as someone needs to pay. The game then finishes out with Rosemary, now grown up, on a bus. She visits Ethan's grave, telling him that she has more tests coming up. She is interrupted by a mysterious man in a suit who tells Rosemary that she is needed. He taunts her by calling her Evelyn, and Rose doesn't take kindly to this. She threatens the man, giving us a clue to how much power she possesses. A sniper seems to be watching from a distance, ready to take Rose out. As they're driving off, a figure appears in the road. Then it ends, telling us that the father's story is now done. Oh, well, that's a lot to discuss and unpack. It's super complicated and there's loads to the story, but here we go. There will be a lot of information in this video. Of course, like I said before, I'll add chapters so you can see the different topics we discuss, but I guess the first thing to talk about would be where the game is actually located. The village in Resident Evil 8 is a fictional village set in Romania, Eastern Europe. We can see evidence for this, such as the houses being traditional Romanian houses. The Romanian currency is lei or leu. The castle is based off the Peles castle in Romania, and the name Dumitrescu is Romanian. Another clue is that the dish Miranda is cooking at the start is a ciorba de legume, which is a Romanian dish. Now, those of you familiar with history will be familiar with the 1918 pandemic called the Spanish flu, which lasted until 1920. Well, this village was also ravaged by the Spanish flu, and the village suffered so many deaths that the villagers were forced to bury loved ones outside of the village graveyard. Believe it or not, despite her young looks, Miranda is actually over 100 years old at the point that Ethan arrives at the village. She is originally from the village and had a daughter called Eva in 1909. One such victim of the previously mentioned Spanish flu was Miranda's 10-year-old daughter Eva, who died as a result of getting sick. After Eva's death, Miranda wandered into the caves to end her own life but came across a black substance. Upon touching a mass growing from the black substance, the root, Miranda was overcome with knowledge, seeing memories of all the people who had died in the village. Miranda realised that the mould, the megamycete it was also referred to as, had absorbed the consciousness of everyone who had died in the village over centuries, including her daughter Eva after they were buried. The mould effectively consumed their bodies, their DNA and their consciousness, a kind of data storage. Anyway, after a life-changing experience in the caves, Miranda brainwashed the villagers into abandoning their original faith and following her as a prophet of the Black God. They became a pagan cult calling her Mother Miranda. This crest is seen throughout the houses in the village. Miranda would use her gift of mimicry and transformation to disguise herself as the old woman so she could spy on the villagers. Over the next few decades, Miranda would implant the villagers with a worm-type parasite which had been genetically altered by the mold called a cadeau, which is Romanian for gift, also close to the French translation which is cadeau. This is why the bakers constantly referred to Evelyn's infection as her gift, as it all stemmed from the cadeau parasite. Miranda would create a lab to conduct research on the mold. Her research? She wanted to use the cadeau to create a perfect vessel and combine it with the remains of her daughter's consciousness in the mold and essentially resurrect Eva. After the villagers had been implanted with this cadeau, pretty much all of them either died or transformed into lichens. The lichens were basically failed cadeau test subjects who were banished from the village so they wouldn't kill all the other villagers, as this would hinder Miranda's research. As a result, the lichens made their den in the stronghold, only coming out at night to kill the livestock. There were, however, 4 particular test subjects who showed the most promise. So in this village there were 4 families, or kings, who founded and ruled over the entire village and the region for many years. There were 4 descendants of these kings, or families, who were also given the cadeau and showed the greatest potential for becoming the vessel for Eva. These descendants were Lady Alcina Dumitrescu, Donna Beneviento, Salvatore Moreau and Karl Heisenberg. Let's do a little bit of character study. Alcina Dumitrescu was the Countess of the castle. She suffered from a hereditary blood disease, which basically translates as her being a vampire. Although she didn't actually live in the village until around the 1950s, she took ownership of the castle from her descendants. At some point after she settled in the castle, she was lured underneath the cemetery by Miranda and was surgically implanted with the cadeau to test her affinity, which measures how well a substance combines with another. She was sent for observation, and as a result of her cadeau implantation, she became mutated with regenerative abilities. She could turn her nails into long, razor-sharp claws and retract them again in seconds, and she could also turn into this. This also halted her aging. However, due to her vampirism and her need for a constant supply of blood, she developed a condition called porphyria, a blood disease which affects a group of chemicals being produced in the body needed to make up hemoglobin. Anyway, science lesson over. Due to this condition and the constant need to keep her health in check, Miranda saw Lady Dumitrescu as a failed experiment and an unfit vessel for Eva. Miranda also implanted the cadeau parasite into 3 female corpses belonging to maids who worked in the castle. Alcina observed the transformation and she documented this. It appears that the cadeau laid eggs, which produced blowfly-type organisms in all 3 corpses, which devoured the flesh, going on to mimic their human appearance, changing colour to make a believable human appearance. Another document mentions that these flies need to consume meat, as they are carnivorous, and it also explains that these flies are weak to sudden drops in temperature. When Ethan shot the window during his fight with Daniela, the flies attempted to hibernate, making them vulnerable to attack. Due to this trait, the three daughters were trapped in the castle.